I spent a lot of time thinking about poverty in America that is not the kind of thinking or the kind of poverty that happens only when it's about political debates or even when it's about really social media arguments or even the attention, but the kind of thinking that happens when you step back and look at the system itself. Because the truth is, the way we talk about poverty is often shallow. People argue over whether the problem is laziness or if it's injustice, personal responsibility, or even like social economic barriers. But after looking closely at the data, the numbers, the patterns, and my personal upbringing and the psychological pressures that poverty produces, I've come to believe something totally different. Poverty in America often operates through two forces that work together like a trap. I call them the cage and the noose. The cage removes a person's ability to exercise their capabilities. The noose, it tightens the psychological pressures until survival decisions kick in. And ultimately, you replace your strategic thinking, your strategic planning. And when those two forces combine, it don't matter if you're intelligent, it don't matter if you're highly capable, people will become immobilized. Now, I want to give you a disclaimer. This isn't theory. This is two things. This is my personal experience, my personal upbringing, and it is my observable reality. There's a lie that floats around here in America about the conversation as it revolves around poverty. The lie says that poverty exists because people are lazy. The lie says that people are irresponsible, and the lie says that people are incapable. But when you look at it closely, at the evidence I'm talking about, when you examine the data, and you examine the systems that has been in place, when you examine the psychological pressures, you discover something totally different. You discover that poverty often functions like two strategic traps operating at the same time. One trap is the cage and the other trap is the noose. The cage removes people's ability to exercise what their skills are, to exercise their capability. The noose tightens the psychological pressure until people panic or until people make decisions out of desperation. Once these two forces combine, I'm telling you, it don't matter if you got all the tools at your disposal, if you don't matter if you have all the backup from your family and things of that nature, you will become immobilized and you will become docile. There was a Chinese strategist, Han Tzu. He wrote this. He said, place a monkey in a cage, and it is the same as a pig, not because it lacks intelligence, because it has no place to exercise its capabilities. The monkey did not lose its intelligence. The system removed its ability to use it. And the same principle appears over and over again here in America. Most conversations about poverty focus on income, but income is the symptom. The real issue is mobility. See, poverty is not simply the absence of money. Poverty is the restriction of economic movement toward better education, movement toward opportunity, movement toward ownership, movement toward stability, ultimately. When those movements become restricted, poverty becomes less of a temporary condition and more of a structural environment. And the evidence shows this clarity. Let me give you some data. According to research from Harvard economist Raj Chetty and the Opportunity Insight Project, children born into the bottom 20% of income earners have roughly a 40% chance of remaining in the bottom as adults. Only about 7 to 8% rise from the bottom fifth to the top fifth of income earners. That means the majority of individuals born into poverty are not simply experiencing temporary setback. They are born into an environment where economic movement is statistically constrained. This is what we call the cage, right? The cage is not always obvious. It is rarely labeled. It operates quietly through structures. How about education? How about your geographical inequality? How about capital access? How about transportation networks? How about housing policy? These are the structures. Now, let's take education for an example. According to the Education Trust, schools serving mostly students of color receive about $23 billion less in funding annually than schools serving mostly white students. The average gap is roughly 2,200 less per student per year. Now imagine two students, both intelligent, both capable, right? But one attends a school with advanced courses, experienced teachers, and most importantly, advanced technology. The other attends a school struggling to maintain basic resources, same intelligence, different environment, different outcomes. That's the cage at work. Y'all get what I'm saying? I got some more stats for you. The Opportunity Atlas project, they found this. Children who move from high poverty neighborhoods to low poverty neighborhoods before the age of 13 earn 31% more income as adults on average. Think about that. The same child, the same intelligence, the same work ethic, change the environment and the outcome changes dramatically. That means potential was never the issue. The environment was the variable. Now let's take the noose for an example, the second trap. The noose, when financial pressures become constant, the brain shifts into survival mode. Now, this is not philosophy. This is neuroscience and behavioral economics. Let me break it down to you. Two researchers found this. They did a study and they found that the effects of scarcity found something astonishing. Scarcity consumes cognitive bandwidth. In controlled experiments, individuals under financial stress perform 13 to 14 IQ points lower on cognitive tests. That is the equivalent of losing an entire night of sleep. The brain becomes preoccupied with urgent problems. How about rent due tomorrow? How about food is running low? Unexpected car repairs, medical bills. So when pressure reaches this level, long-term thinking collapses. The mind becomes focused on intermediate survival. That is the noose tightening. According to the Federal Reserve, they did a survey on household economics, and nearly 37% of Americans cannot cover a $400 emergency expense with cash. They will need to borrow money. They will need to sell something. They will need to miss a payment. This is not a small minority of people. This is tens of millions of people operating under constant financial pressure. And pressure changes behavior, and it changes decision-making. It changes people's risk tolerance. This is why people don't invest. How about this? Let me give you an example. How about payday loan or payday lending, right? They provide a perfect example for us when the noose is in effect. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that on average, payday loans, their APR is around 400%. Nearly 80% of payday loans are rolled over or renewed. People take the loan to survive the immediate moment, but the interest rate deepens the financial hole. The struggle to escape that trap actually tightens the trap, exactly like the noose describes, people. Now, we arrive at a crucial point. The cage restricts opportunity. The noose restricts decision-making. And when these two forces combine, poverty becomes self-reinforcing. I want y'all to really get that. When the cage restricts opportunity, the noose restricts decision-making. With these two, poverty becomes self-reinforcing. Why? Because we have limited opportunity, which creates the financial pressure. The financial pressure creates short-term decision-making, and short-term decision-making deepens financial instability. And then the cycle repeats. This is why poverty often persists across generations, not because of the intelligence have disappeared, not because the work ethic have disappeared, but because the system and the pressure operates simultaneously together. Now, I got to give you some scripture. The Bible recognizes structural injustice long before modern economists ever came onto the picture. Let's take Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 8. If you see oppression of the poor and violent perversion of justice and righteousness in the province, do not marvel at the matter. See, scripture acknowledges that systems become distorted, that systems become oppressive at times. And when systems, let me say, become oppressive or individuals inside them suffer the consequences, this is when we have a problem. History repeatedly shows us that when the cage opens, capability emerges. Consider immigrant entrepreneurship. According to the National Foundation for American Policy, immigrants have founded over 55% of America's billion-dollar startup companies. Many arrived with limited resources, but they entered into environments where their skills could operate. Opportunity expanded their capability. This is an example of the cage opening. See, escaping poverty historically requires disrupting both traps. The cage must loosen, right? And the noose must be relaxed. This often happens through a couple things. Let me break it down to you. It happens through one of skill acquisition or education, right? Number two, it happens through the access to capital or the access to ownership. Why? Because then you can sell or refinance and things of that nature to get yourself to the next level. Now, relocation to opportunity rich environments is another. And most importantly, mentorships, right? Fatherhood or uncles and things of that nature, or people who just want to step in and show you a way. And that is through network expansion. Now, none of these eliminate the hardship, but they expand the space in which capability can operate. Now, let's be honest, system matters, but choices still matter. There are individuals who escape poverty despite structural barriers. There are individuals who remain trapped even when opportunities appear. Both realities exist. Ignoring systems is naive, but ignoring your personal agency is equally naive. The truth sits in the tension between the two. Now, in closing, I want to say this. The greatest tragedy in society is not the lack of intelligence. It is the suppression of intelligence. It is the caging of potential. It is the tightening of pressure until people can only react rather than strategize. When the cage opens, capability becomes visible. When the noose loosens, then strategy returns. And history repeatedly proves that once human potential is allowed to operate freely, the results can change families. The results can change communities, entire generations. I'm a product of that truth. Until next time, own your tempo, move with purpose, and build with power.